Level 1, the copier. You don't start as a criminal. You start as someone who is very, very good at something no one wants to pay for. You paint. You've painted since you were 11. Oils, acrylics, watercolor, charcoal. Every medium, every technique. You studied at a decent art school, graduated near the top of your class, sold exactly 3 original pieces in 4 years. One to your aunt, one to a professor who felt sorry for you, one to a stranger at a street fair who paid $80 and haggled you down from $120. So you do what skilled, underpaid artists have always done. You copy, not to sell, not yet, just to practice. You choose a Modigliani, study the elongation, the flat eyes, the warm ochre skin tones. You spend 6 weeks on it. When you finish, your roommate can't tell the difference from the poster on your wall. And that's when a friend mentions something offhand. A gallery owner downtown buys decorative period pieces for staging. Not originals, just convincing replicas. Good condition, right frame, right feel. You bring the Modigliani. The gallery owner holds it at arm's length for a long time. He doesn't look at you, he looks at the brushwork. Then he hands you $400 cash. No contract, no receipt, no questions. You walk to the subway feeling something you haven't felt in years. Not pride, not even excitement. Something quieter. The specific satisfaction of being paid exactly what you're worth by someone who actually knows what they're looking at. You go home, you start another one. Level 2, the restorer. Word moves quietly in the art world. It always does. A small auction house contacts you 6 weeks later. They need someone who can touch up damaged canvases before sale. Minor restoration, a scratch here, faded pigment there. Someone who understands older techniques, old varnish, period-accurate brushwork. You say yes. The pay is modest, $800 for a full day's work on a 19th century landscape. You fix it so well that the specialist reviewing it doesn't even flag where you work. That's the moment they start trusting you with bigger pieces. You learn the craft from the inside, how forgeries get detected. UV light reveals newer paint, X-ray shows underdrawing inconsistencies. Infrared reflectography catches pentimento that shouldn't exist. Chemical analysis dates pigments. You learn what trips people up. Titanium white wasn't available before 1921. Zinc white before 1834. Certain cadmium yellows date after 1840. Phthalocyanine blue after 1935. The wrong pigment in the wrong era ends careers and begins investigations. You study provenance documents, the paper trail that follows a painting, from studio to collector to auction. You learn to read them the way lawyers read contracts. What's missing? What's too perfect? What looks authentic versus what is authentic. You restore 40 paintings that year. You flag nothing suspicious. You don't ask questions about pieces that make you pause. And quietly, you start asking yourself a different question. If you can restore the past, can you create it? Level 3, the Craftsman. The first one you sell as something it isn't costs you 8 months of preparation and nets you $11,400. You are methodical. You source period canvas from estate sales and dismantled frames. You sand off minor prints that wouldn't survive scrutiny, keep the weave, keep the age. You prepare the ground layer with rabbit skin glue, same as they used. You mix your own pigments from historically accurate formulations. Bone black, lead white, iron earth. You age the varnish with walnut oil and slight heat exposure. You study crack lure, the specific cracking pattern that develops in old paint. Under different humidity conditions, different binding media, you learn to induce it artificially without making it look induced. The piece is a minor Dutch Golden Age interior. No famous signature, attributed to the school of. Those words do more work than people realize. They remove scrutiny. They suggest authenticity without requiring proof. A mid-tier dealer in Belgium buys it through an intermediary. He doesn't examine it closely. He wants it for a client who wants something that looks right on the wall of a country house. $11,400. 6 months later, he comes back. Do you have anything else? You do. You've been working on something else. 2 things, actually. You've learned to work in parallel, different styles, different periods, different techniques. Specializing in one artist is a trap. Specialists get recognized. You work across movements, late Impressionist, early Modernist, Northern European realism. You never repeat a signature. Your income crosses $60,000 that year. All cash, all invisible. You tell yourself you're not hurting anyone, and the buyers want to believe. The dealers want a margin. No one is asking hard questions because no one wants the answers. You're just giving the market what it already wants. Level 4, the Authenticator's problem. The trouble with the art world is that it runs on trust dressed up as expertise. You understand this by your 4th year. Provenance can be fabricated. Certificates of authenticity can be purchased. Expert opinion can be bought or, at minimum, gently influenced. An auction house specialist earns a percentage of what they sell. Their incentive and their objectivity are in permanent conflict. You start studying the institutions, which auction houses are thorough, which ones move fast, which dealers ask to see documentation, which ones accept a plausible story over dinner. You begin building backstories, not elaborate ones. Elaborate stories draw attention. You build simple ones. A painting with a modest history, found in a provincial estate, previously in a private collection that kept no public records, deaccessioned quietly, sold at a regional house in the 1970s for far less than its value, purchased by a discreet collector, now available. Gaps in provenance are not red flags. Not if the gaps fall in the right periods. Wars scattered collections, families fled, records burned. A canvas that disappears between 1938 and 1947 raises fewer questions than one with a perfect unbroken chain. You commission quiet supporting documents, not forgeries of famous papers, small things, shipping manifests, old gallery stickers on stretcher backs, a partial inventory in period typeface. You move carefully, 2 pieces per year. Never the same dealer twice in a row. Never the same geographic market consecutively. London, Zurich, New York, a secondary house in Vienna. Her income crosses $400,000. You open a legitimate consulting firm. Art advisory, valuation, estate assessment. You pay taxes on $120,000 of it. The rest moves through accounts you don't think about too closely. Something starts changing, not in the work, in you. You stop looking at real paintings with awe. You look at them technically. Composition, pigment, ground layer. You see craft where you once felt something else. You can't remember when that shift happened. Level 5, the network. You can't scale alone. That's the lesson you learn when a piece you sold in Zurich resurfaces at a major New York auction house for 3 times what the dealer paid. For a week, you monitor the listing. No one flags it. It sells. Clean. But the math tells you something important. The dealer made more than you did. The auction house made more than the dealer, and you did all the work. So you find partners. Carefully, over years. First, a document specialist, former academic, disgraced, not publicly, quietly. He lost a position over questions about provenance research that were never formally investigated. He understands what you need. He provides it, supporting materials that can survive casual inspection. Library stamps, exhibition catalog entries with real print runs from the 1950s. You pay him well. Second, a shipper, a man who handles estate logistics across 3 countries. He knows how to move art without creating a searchable import record. He asks no questions you don't answer. Third, a dealer, young, ambitious, operates in the secondary market in Amsterdam. He has relationships you don't. He provides the handshake between the work and the buyer. You never meet his clients. He never meets your studio. The network is clean because each person knows only their part. If one is exposed, the chain stops there. That's theory. You believe it until you have to. Revenue that year, $1.4 million. Your legitimate business absorbs $300,000 of it. You move to a better apartment. You collect a small number of real paintings, minor works, genuine ones, things you could sell quickly if you needed to move. You tell yourself you could stop anytime. Anash, you could go back to restoration, go back to copying for decorators, but you already know something about yourself. You can't go back, not because of the money, because the work is the most interesting problem you've ever solved, and you haven't solved the hardest version yet. Level 6, the attribution. The difference between a work attributed to a school and a work attributed to the artist is sometimes $40,000, sometimes $4 million. That gap is where you start working. Not Picasso, not Monet. Too much scholarship, too much institutional attention. Every brushstroke documented, photographed, debated. You choose the edges. Artists with significant reputations but incomplete catalogs. A mid-century American abstractionist whose estate is handled by a foundation that moves slowly. A post-impressionist Belgian whose papers are scattered across 4 countries. An early female modernist whose work was systematically undervalued and underdocumented by the institutions of her time. You spend a year studying each target, reading every monograph, every exhibition catalog, every scholarly paper. You understand their hand better than most of their current admirers, better than some of the experts who authenticate them. When the first attributable work moves through a respected specialist, you wait. He examines it, takes 2 weeks, issues a certificate, confident attribution. It sells at a New York auction for $740,000. Your cut after the network, $210,000. You feel something strange sitting across from the auction result printed in a trade journal. Pride is not the right word. Something colder, Confirmation. You've solved the problem correctly. Your document specialist sends a message. Careful. That name draws eyes now. You understand. The specialist who authenticated it has a reputation worth protecting. If doubts surface later, he has incentive to stand by his opinion. But scrutiny still travels. You wait 9 months before moving the next piece. Patience is the discipline the others in your industry lose first. Level 7, the scholar's eye. By year 7, something unexpected happens. You become genuinely knowledgeable, not just technically, historically. You've spent so many hours inside the minds of these artists, tracking their habits, their periods, their obsessions, their technical evolutions, that you understand them with the depth of a serious scholar. You start writing anonymous contributions to online forums, short essays under a pseudonym that develops a small following. Art historians begin citing your pseudonym in footnotes. It creates something useful, a reputation in the field that isn't attached to your name, access to private academic discussions, early word on newly discovered works, advance notice on catalog research. It also creates something dangerous. You start caring about getting it right, not just technically accurate. Yeah, actually right. Honest to the period, honest to the hand. One afternoon, you examine a work your document specialist flagged as an opportunity, a mediocre piece, genuinely old, with a misattributed connection to a more significant name. You reject it, not because the deal is risky, because the attribution is wrong. The work isn't by that artist. You know it isn't. Selling it as such feels different from what you normally do. You sit with that feeling for a long time. This is the contradiction of your life now. You've built a career on false attribution, but you've also built a genuine expertise that makes the falseness more precise. You're the most honest person in the room about what you're lying about. That knowledge doesn't protect you, but it does change you. Level 8, the 7-figure problem. The network has a logic. It wants to scale. Your dealer in Amsterdam has a client, a private collection in the Gulf. New money, ambitious taste, advisors who know enough to sound expert, but not enough to detect what you can produce. A standing order, museum quality works, significant names, reasonable questions. The commission, 3 pieces over 18 months, significant attributions, total value $9 to $12 million at market. Your cut after network, $2.1 million. You say yes. You begin preparing. This is different from everything before. The amounts attract a different level of scrutiny. Insurance companies send their own specialists. The buyer's advisors commission independent technical analysis. The works will be lent to institutions, possibly exhibited. You spend 14 months on the first piece alone. You source a period canvas that has never been on any record. You prepare it twice, stripping back the first layer when the ground texture isn't right. You study 400 authenticated works. You develop a specific visual tic, a slight characteristic in how this artist constructed shadow in late period work. You replicate it once, study it, eliminate it, replicate it more naturally. The provenance chain you construct takes 4 months, documents from 3 countries, 2 real auction records from the 1950s that you've edited digitally and had printed on period paper, a photograph of the work in a private setting that looks like the 1960s because it was taken on a 1960s film camera with 1960s film you sourced from a specialty dealer. The piece moves, examined by 2 specialists, passes, $3.3 million at a private sale. The second and third pieces take 11 months each. By the time the last transfer clears, you have $6.1 million across accounts in 4 countries. You don't celebrate, you calculate. At this scale, the exposure is different. Insurers keep files. Academic catalogs will eventually reflect these works. In 10 years, 20 years, when the scholarship catches up, questions may form. You've always operated with a horizon. Now you start thinking about what happens past it. Level 9. The provenance question. The call comes from your Amsterdam dealer. His voice is controlled but flat. One of the Gulf pieces has been flagged. Not the authentication, the provenance. A researcher in the Netherlands building a catalog raisonné has found inconsistencies in a 1950s auction record. The record you edited. The record appears in 2 places, in your chain and in the original archive, which the researcher has now photographed. The lot numbers don't match. The gap is small, but the researcher is diligent, and diligent researchers talk to insurers. You have 72 hours before this becomes something you can't control. You execute the plan you built but hoped you wouldn't need. You close the consulting firm, properly with filings with a plausible business reason. You transfer ownership of your apartment through a structure that takes time to unwind. You liquidate 3 of the real paintings through a legitimate dealer. Clean cash. You destroy the studio completely. Pigments, documentation, the reference library, a fire that the fire department attributes to an improperly stored solvent. No injuries, minimal loss officially. You contact the document specialist through a channel you've never used before. 2 words. Going dark. He replies in 4. Already done. Good luck. You move within the week. Different country. Different name. Not a perfect new identity. Those draw attention when tested. A partial identity. Enough to live quietly. You carry 4 things. A passport, a hardware drive, $340,000 in cash across 3 currencies, and a small, genuine painting you did when you were 19. An original. No one else's hand. Yours. You don't know if anyone is following. You won't know for years. Level 10, the ghost. The apartment is small, a city where you don't speak the language well enough to make friends, which is the point. You paint real things this time. No signature, no sale. You fill canvases and stack them against the wall. Sometimes you paint over them. Sometimes you just look at them. The inquiry in Amsterdam stalls. Without the piece in question available for re-examination, and with the seller's chain now represented by a dissolved firm, the researcher publishes a footnote. Possible irregularity. Further research pending. It stays a footnote for 2 years. Then another researcher picks it up, publishes a paper. The buyer quietly removes the work from display. No announcement. These things rarely announce themselves. Your name is not in the paper. Your pseudonym is not connected to your real identity. The network is disbanded. The document specialist died of natural causes 8 months after you left. The shipper retired. The dealer in Amsterdam moved into real estate. You read about the paper in an online alert you set up under a name that connects to nothing. Then you close the browser. The city outside your window moves normally. Market stalls, children, someone arguing on a phone. Normal life. The permanent sound of a world that doesn't know what just moved through it. You open a new canvas. You don't sign it. Somewhere right now, a very talented painter is looking at $80 in their account and thinking about a gallery owner who will pay cash for something convincing. They have no idea how quiet it gets at the end or how long quiet can last. The cycle begins.